Story 1. I worked for a man as a security guard for a dot-com company in 2000. He wouldn't pay overtime, demanded over 60-hour work weeks, and would call you in on your days off. I refused one time and he terminated me. I returned all my uniforms and he charged me $180 in cleaning fees. Out of a job, I talked to the building facility manager about some of the shady things I saw him doing. He told me if I had my own security license and insurance, he would terminate their contract and hire me. So that's what I did. A few days later, I was coming in the front door and security stopped me. He told me that I had been terminated and was no longer allowed on the property. The building facility manager came out and told him I was there on official business with them. The following Monday, new contract in hand, I entered the front door of the property and relieved my former boss of his duties and escorted him off the property. I could see steam coming out of his ears. He was angry. Story 2. The previous manager was a completely horrible person. I'll spare the details. She ran our team into the ground, then laid off a bunch of us, including myself, a year ago. Then she found another job 2 months later and left. I recently found out she started her own consulting company and announced it on a popular job social media site. What she failed to do was secure the domain names and social media handles for the new business venture. I took every variation I could think of. Story 3. I ran a painting company in college and did a lot of work in my own neighborhood. After completing most of the job, the neighbor called me and refused to pay at all unless the price was dropped. I explained that the only person he would be hurting would be me, as everyone else is still entitled to the money they worked for. The neighbor still demanded a price cut, which resulted in me paying to do the job. It's a shame he didn't get the color approved by the Neighborhood Homeowners Association. One anonymous complaint later, and the neighbor had to pay to repaint it. Story 4. My boss had a reputation for smashing keyboards and mice when he would get mad. So I bought a cheap wireless mouse and plugged the dongle into the back of his personal computer where no one would ever see it. I could look across the hall and kind of see when he was using the mouse, and I would just nudge the cursor enough that it would feel like there was something glitching. I got him to break another mouse that week. Story 5. I was brought in as a ringer for a master swimming team between college seasons. I didn't have much money, but they said it was fine as long as I helped people with their strokes and won at my events. It worked. We took second in the state at the end of the summer meet and the open water competition. The team dramatically improved. After the season ended, I was planning to keep training with them for the last 2 weeks before school. The treasurer asked me for dues over the last few months, and the coach pressured me too. They both conveniently forgot our original deal after the team did so well. So, I reached out to the state swimming leadership to tell them that I was getting benefits to swim. They disqualified the team from the results. I also referred the Internal Revenue Service to audit the coach since he was being paid under the table for coaching and lessons. He got audited. Maybe he shouldn't have bragged about that. Story 6. School bully showed up at my work once to turn in an application. It was a cool, higher-paying job for teenagers. He asked me why I was there, and I told him I worked there. His attitude changed, and he begged me to put in a good word for him. I said, "Oh, sure thing." I walked in, went to my manager's office, and told him, "So-and-so just applied. Please don't hire him." He bullied me and others relentlessly. My manager crumpled up his application and threw it away. Story 7. I had an order at a roofing company worth around £4,500. They accidentally ordered me the wrong soffit bends with 2 pieces arriving broken. I asked if I could do a simple swap for the correct parts in store. The sales guy looked at the cracked PVC pieces and said, "What do you expect me to do with these? No chance I can take these back." I asked the guy to look up my account, and he confirmed my name, address, and the total amount I had on order. "Yes, that's me. Cancel the order, please," I said. The sales guy started becoming frantic as I waved the piece of broken PVC and said goodbye. In short, the salesperson refused to swap a £2.50 piece of broken plastic, at their fault, I might add, and lost £4,500 worth of business. Story 8. A customer would come into my store, and often deposit a candy bar wrapper into one of the shopping carts waiting in the entry like it was a garbage can. On many occasions, he had told me he was diabetic and did this specific errand for his wife so he could sneak his favorite candy bars. After he disappeared out of sight, I retrieved his garbage and waited. When I saw him approaching my register, I quickly dropped the wrapper in the shopping bag that I put the cans of dog food he was purchasing into. I hope he never looked in the bag and just went home and left it for his wife to put away so she would discover his sneaky snack. I do know it was several weeks before I saw him again. Story 9. This girl who bullied me mercilessly in 6th grade came into the Chinese restaurant where I worked a few years later, and I crushed her fortune cookie when I put it in the bag. Story 10. I had a narcissistic mom who made my life total hell. And my dad let it slip to me that it meant a lot to her for us to go shopping together for my prom dress. I had a part-time job and spent months saving the money to buy everything myself from a thrift store. This was around 1997 when that wasn't typically done. I dressed up and went alone, and it was her first taste of being eliminated from my life due to her endless painful emotional manipulations throughout my childhood. Story 11. Ex-fiancée cheated on me with her boss. I was devastated. I really thought she was the one. I also knew that the company had a zero-tolerance policy against that type of thing between anyone and their direct manager. Spent a couple of months working things out with her until I had all the proof I needed. Emailed his boss, all other managers, human resources, and corporate every condemning screenshot I had. They both ended up fired, and I still have no regrets. He knew we were engaged and finally offered her a promotion to get her to sleep with him, and I had a copy of that screenshot too. Story 12. A former coworker was absolutely horrible to me. We work in a pretty niche industry. I've been out of that company for years, but still in the same industry. He got laid off and applied at my job. He had the audacity to send me a note asking for a reference. I said okay and then made sure he didn't get it. Story 13. When I was a child, I was beaten quite often. To get back at my dad, I'd touch his toothbrush on my bottom, so I'd get beaten, and he'd brush his teeth with a hint of my bottom. Story 14. When I was in the 5th grade, there was a kid who used to absolutely torment me. Not doing a full backstory, but I was homeschooled prior to 5th grade and was a bit awkward. Anyway, he was terrible. And it wasn't just verbal. He would pants me often, punch me, give me Indian burns, etc. Also, weird things like getting his friends to pick me last in games in physical education, and then mocking me for being last. The last straw came when he and his friends grabbed me as I walked home from school and threw me over a fence into a yard on the way home with a big dog. And yes, it did bite me. Anyway, this was the 80s, so it was very boys will be boys from the adults in my life. So I plotted my revenge. Whenever the bell rang after recess, it was a huge melee of kids all running en masse full speed back to the classroom buildings. I made sure to be near him at the end of recess, and when the bell rang, I ran on the grass behind him, waiting for him to get to the blacktop. As soon as he crossed onto the blacktop, I sped up, jumped, and came down right on his back with my knee, driving him into the ground hard. It broke his arm, nose, busted both lips, and chipped one of his teeth. I also skinned my other knee, not intentionally, but it worked out well, and asked for help. I went to the nurse. He went to the hospital and, "I'm sorry I tripped," was not questioned much. Kids fell down and got hurt during that big rush pretty often, which is what gave me the idea. I don't know if he knew I did it on purpose, but he never messed with me or really even talked to me ever again. I did feel kind of bad as I didn't expect him to be injured that badly, but not too much. I did try to get adults to intervene more than once with no success. Law of the jungle, I guess. I should add that in my adult life, I'm absolutely the most nonviolent person you'd ever meet. Story 15. When I was 17, I worked at Pizza Hut and was allowed to bring home meals. Every so often, my sister would call and ask for a personal pan pizza. I would find new ways to hide jalapenos in it whenever she was being difficult. She started getting good at searching for it. Some days I did nothing to it, and she'd still take it apart to make sure there wasn't a jalapeno in it. At one point, I hid it inside the crust. Unless she tore it apart, she'd never find it. We were 2 years apart in age, and she was a little troublemaker in high school, so it was my best version of revenge. Story 16. A long time ago, I was in a relationship, engaged to someone who suffered a psychotic break. Over the course of 6 months, they stepped out of our reality and into their own. I tried to keep things together, but eventually realized I couldn't. I noticed the bad days outweighed the good days. I realized she needed treatment, and she was absolutely refusing it. She had a habit of calling the police over imagined slights, and I knew it was a matter of time before they hauled her off. I'd seen her scream at a handful of doctors already. I knew that it was putting the relationship at risk, but her health was more important. I was able to keep up a lie for a little over a month about her getting access to medication at the hospital in order to get her in a room with a doctor there. It took a few minutes for her to be certified and committed to the psychiatric ward. She was there for a few weeks, diagnosed and medicated. Shortly after being released, she broke up with me. Understandably, we don't talk. I hope she kept up with her medication. Story 17. I completely moved out when my now ex was on a fishing trip. Yes, I took my bed and my flat screen that was in our bedroom. He came home late at night after driving 10 hours to no bed. And most importantly, no more punching bag, me. Story 18. My wife and I are separated. She was still signing in on my Netflix account. I waited until she was up to a series finale of a show, then signed out all devices and changed the password. Story 19. A kind of mid-level guy on my team who had been there for years was supposed to be my mentor and trainer. He would constantly have mood swings, harass me, say how he hates everyone in my previous department, have fits by screaming and cursing at the top of his lungs, and then eventually started talking about me and my family behind my back. He would joke that everyone on his shift should be fired except him because he does all the work. He's the guy who would start rumors about everyone, including our managers and bosses. It was the worst experience of my entire career. I knew no one would believe me except one other person who witnessed it and was also newer, because he had already been there 10 years. He also did weird stuff that I'm not going to get into. So I started taking notes every time he did something like this with exact dates and times, pretty much building my case. After 1 year, I sent a very professional email to my 2 top managers in the department. They opened a whole case and corroborated the story with other people in the department he had been harassing. He ended up getting suspended for a week and warned that if anything like this happens again, he will be terminated. Before you ask, yes, I tried talking to him one-on-one several times. I tried every avenue before writing that email. Story 20. Around 2013, my 6-year relationship ended abruptly after we sold the house, and she locked up the profits we made. She was on my Sprint account back when you had the 2-year contracts on your phone, and she had about 6 months left on her contract. I called Sprint to cancel the contract, and it was about $400 to end it 6 months early. After doing the math, it was cheaper to just pay the extra $50 for the next 6 months. Her birthday is in October, and at the end of September, she said she was going to get her own line. I called Sprint and explained the situation, and the Sprint representative suggested I suspend her line. Basically, her phone number, which she had for over 6 years, contractually belonged to me. On the early morning of her birthday, around 5 a.m., I suspended her phone line. Her phone became unusable and wouldn't even access Wi-Fi for some reason. She woke up on her birthday with 0 missed calls and 0 texts wishing her a happy birthday. After a few hours, I got a call from Sprint asking if I would release her phone number so she could attach it to her own new line. No way. She spent her birthday having to reach out to everyone explaining what happened. Happy birthday. Story 21. When I was in year 5, a bully used to follow me home to intimidate me. He did this for a couple of days in a row. On the 3rd day, I hid some sticks under a tree on the way to school, and when he followed me, I hit him with the sticks. Story 22. I was wrongly fired at a company and left for an immediate competitor. Within 6 months, all of the company's best people followed me. The previous company accused me of poaching, when in reality all the people who left reached out to me, not vice versa. Story 23. Had a coworker who would frequently leave her spot to go to the bathroom, which meant going for a smoke break. We work on a conveyor belt, so I had to keep picking up her slack. If I didn't, the belt would jam up. She would leave several times in a single shift every day and always came back smelling like cigarette smoke. One day, she left, and then the head manager walked down the aisles to inspect the belts. I told her that the person next to me went out the door and had been gone for a while, so the manager went to look for her. The coworker came back immediately and apparently tried to hide behind a semi-trailer in the yard. Story 24. I played a draw 4 on my child during their very first game of Uno. I did it when they went down to 1. You're going to learn there's no allies in Uno, kiddo. Story 25. Mom bought my sister and me 2 ice blocks as a treat for dessert. As I was putting them in the freezer, I dropped one, which broke the top above the stick. It was agreed that this was my ice block. After dinner, I go to get my broken ice block out of the freezer. My sister screeches. She believes I have taken the unbroken ice block and left her the broken one. I tell her that it was mine, but she wouldn't believe me. She complains to Mom, who tells me just to swap it out. My sister took my ice block, and lo and behold, it was broken. I enjoyed my rainbow paddle pop and my victory. My sister enjoyed extra salt on hers because of the tears. The best part was that the diabolical scheme required no action on my part. All it needed was for my sister to be the brat that she is.